Welcome to Echo Veins. I buried my husband beneath a sky that seemed to sag under its own grief. Clouds pressed low, swollen with rain they never released, as though the heavens themselves wanted to mourn but couldn't find the strength to weep. The earth swallowed him, slow and unyielding, and I felt each shovel of dirt strike my chest as if it were my own heart being covered. People surrounded me, neighbors, distant cousins, old friends whose names blurred in the fog of loss. Yet I had never felt so alone. Their condolences slid past me like smoke. He was such a good man. You were lucky to have him. Stay strong. Hollow words from hollow mouths. I nodded where I was expected, kept my veil low enough to hide the tears I could not control. But even in that haze of sorrow, I noticed her. Elise. She stood only a few paces away, her gloved hands clutching a lace handkerchief she never once used. Her cheeks glistened with perfect, symmetrical tears, too neat to be real. She was an actress, and the grave was her stage. When her eyes met mine, there was no grief there, only calculation, sharp and cold, like a predator measuring the exact moment to strike. I looked away, but I felt her gaze burning through the veil, a reminder that my loss was her opportunity. She had always hungered for more than her share, more attention, more control, more wealth. My husband had seen it too. In his final weeks, as his body withered but his mind remained sharp, he had gripped my hand and whispered truths I hadn't wanted to believe. "Do not trust her," he rasped, his breath heavy with pain. "Promise me if she reaches for the safe, remember the second key." I had promised, though at the time I didn't fully understand. Now, standing by his grave, I realized what he had left me wasn't just grief. It was a weapon, hidden and waiting. Elise believed she was clever enough to outmaneuver a widow drowning in sorrow. She had no idea my husband's last gift was the very thing that could destroy her. And as the coffin disappeared, I felt it. Her strike was already coming. When the last car pulled away, silence poured through the house like smoke, thick and suffocating. The scent of lilies lingered from the funeral arrangements, sweet but cloying, and beneath it, I caught something sharper, Elise's perfume, still hanging in the air. Her footsteps echoed above me, too quick, too restless for grief. She claimed she needed rest, that the day had drained her. But I knew better. Elise didn't hide her intentions well. She was impatient, and impatience was the first crack in her mask. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, fingertips grazing the photographs on the wall, the armrests still warm where my husband once sat. The emptiness pressed down, not only from loss but from the knowledge that danger was already inside these walls, wearing a widow's black dress. That night, I heard the faint slam of a door. Elise was gone, leaving only the trail of her perfume behind, drifting through the hallway like a warning. I didn't follow. Some battles are not won by chasing. I let her go, because I already knew where she was headed. By morning, whispers reached me through neighbors' lips, disguised as condolences. Elise had been seen at the bank, slipping inside with an urgency unbecoming of a grieving daughter-in-law. The news twisted inside me, not with fear but with grim confirmation. She had wasted no time, rushing toward what she thought was her triumph. I returned to my room and opened the drawer where the velvet pouch lay hidden. My fingers closed around it, feeling the hard, cold edge of key number 2. My husband's final safeguard. His voice returned to me, rasping from the depths of memory. Trust no one, especially her. And I knew then, her betrayal had only just begun. By midday, Elise swept through the doorway, her heels clicking against the polished floor like a drumbeat of victory. Her cheeks were flushed, her smile stretched too wide, and her arms flung around me with the theatrical embrace of a performer basking in applause. "We'll be all right," she murmured, voice syrupy, as if her sudden optimism came from faith rather than greed. But I felt the tremor in her fingers, the energy of someone high on conquest. She floated through the house, humming as though grief had already slipped from her shoulders. Her laughter rang out, too sharp, too loud, a note that pierced through the heavy curtains and empty halls. I followed her with my eyes, not my words. Silence was my disguise, and she mistook it for weakness. Every smile she flashed, every exaggerated gesture of sympathy, only confirmed the truth. Elise believed she had won. I pictured her at the bank, signing papers with trembling hands, feigning dignity while her heart pounded at the thought of unlocking the safe. She would have leaned in with greedy anticipation, certain that my husband had left behind nothing more than stacks of money waiting for her. She could not have known that what she touched was only a shell. The real treasure, the heart of his legacy, remained locked away, sealed by the second key resting in my possession. Without it, she had grasped at shadows, mistaking emptiness for wealth. My husband had foreseen her lust for power, and he had designed his trap with the precision of a man who knew betrayal was inevitable. I watched her twirl in the living room, the hem of her black dress spinning like a vulture's wing. She thought the future belonged to her now. She thought I was defeated. But in the hidden chamber, beneath layers of steel and secrecy, waited documents and truths sharp enough to cut her life apart. And I swore, as her laughter echoed through my hollow house, that when the time came, I would be the one to watch her crumble. Nights stretched long after the funeral, each one heavier than the last. I would lie awake in the dark, the ceiling above me nothing but a canvas for thoughts that refused to rest. Through the thin walls, Elise's voice carried, hushed but excited, tinged with the arrogance of someone who believed fortune already belonged to her. I heard her whispering into the phone, her tone dripping with triumph. "We'll travel. We'll invest. I'll never have to answer to her again." Each promise she made was a dagger, not because of what she planned, but because she believed she had the right. She spoke of freedom, of money she had not yet touched, as if the world were already hers to command. The house became an echo chamber of her schemes. By day she floated about with newfound confidence, her steps lighter, her laughter sharper. By night, she fed her greed with fantasies shared in secret conversations. And I, still dressed in black, still carrying grief like an open wound, kept silent. Every instinct urged me to confront her, to strip the smile from her face with the truth of her ignorance. But revenge is not fed by impulse, it is nourished by time. I forced myself into stillness, swallowing humiliation like bitter medicine, because survival demanded patience. Elise mistook my quiet for surrender, and in her blindness she revealed everything: her patterns, her plans, her arrogance. I became her shadow, studying the rise and fall of her moods, memorizing the rhythm of her schemes. I knew the moment would come when her hunger for more would drive her into a mistake too costly to erase. And when it did, I would be waiting, with the second key clenched in my hand. Elise was clever enough to know she could not dismantle me alone. Her brother, Daniel, appeared soon after, a man with a smile that never reached his eyes. He carried groceries into my kitchen, offered to fix a leaky faucet, and lingered too long in the rooms where my husband's belongings remained. His politeness was a costume, and beneath it, I saw the same hunger that burned in Elise. Together they wove a net around me, pretending to care while slowly tightening their grip. But it was my son, Martin, who delivered the deepest wound. When I tried to warn him, when I begged him to see Elise for what she truly was, he recoiled as though I had struck him. "You're imagining things," he snapped, his face twisted with the kind of anger reserved for strangers, not mothers. To him, I was the villain, the bitter widow who couldn't let go, the jealous mother who despised her daughter-in-law. My words, my tears, fell useless at his feet. Soon, whispers circulated. Relatives who had once trusted me now cast suspicious glances. Elise painted me as unstable, grieving to the point of madness, clinging to shadows instead of reality. Their sympathy turned from me to her. I became the burden, the problem, the woman too fragile to be believed. Humiliation wrapped around me like chains, stripping me of the authority I once carried. And yet, in that forced silence, I discovered something unexpected: strength. Their perception of me as powerless was a shield. If they thought I was broken, they would never guard themselves. They would plot openly, unafraid, certain I posed no threat. But they were wrong, very wrong, because broken things can cut the deepest. I let Elise strut through the house like a queen, her false crown gleaming in the dim light of my grief. She believed I was defeated, that my silence was surrender, but silence is never empty. It is strategy. I wore it like armor while she mistook it for weakness. I began planting seeds, subtle whispers in the ears of acquaintances who adored gossip. I spoke of hidden accounts, of wealth my husband had tucked away beyond the reach of lawyers or heirs. I fed them half-truths, never enough to draw suspicion to myself, but just enough to stir Elise's insatiable curiosity. Soon, those whispers wound their way back to her like poisoned fruit, and I saw the hunger ignite in her eyes. Her pride swelled. She moved with the confidence of someone who thought she had discovered a secret treasure map. but greed clouds reason, and Elise was blinded by it. She pushed harder, spoke more openly of investments, and paraded as if her fortune was already secure. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. Martin approached me one evening, his voice tight, his words rehearsed. "Elise says you have another key," he pressed, eyes darting away from mine. "If you care about our future, you'll give it to us. For financial security." Financial security. That was her excuse. The words tasted rotten even as he spoke them. My own son, carrying her demand like a servant bearing a tray. I looked into his face and saw not his love for me, but his loyalty to her. I said nothing. I gave nothing. And in that silence, they revealed everything. Their desperation, their impatience, their fear of losing what they had never truly possessed. It was almost time to strike. The call came like a thunderclap. The bank manager's voice was tight with fury, demanding my presence. Elise, in her arrogance, had attempted to force her way into the second chamber. She thought sheer entitlement could unlock what steel and secrecy had protected. She was wrong. When I arrived, the room smelled of polished wood and cold ink, the air sharp with tension. Elise stood by the safe, her hands trembling though she tried to disguise it behind a veneer of outrage. Her lipstick was smudged, her face pale beneath layers of powder. For the first time, she looked less like a predator and more like prey. The manager gestured sharply toward the documents now spread across the desk. She insisted. I warned her. But this, his voice faltered, disgust curling his words. I stepped forward, my heart steady, my pulse slow, as though I had been waiting for this precise moment. Before me lay the truth my husband had hidden with such care. His will, written in his deliberate hand. His confession of distrust, naming Elise as the shadow gnawing at our family. And letters. Proof of her manipulations, the quiet thefts, the lies whispered into Martin's ear. Elise's voice broke into a stammer. This isn't, he didn't. But her mask had cracked, and every word she uttered only deepened her guilt. Martin stood frozen, his face stripped of denial, his eyes locked on the evidence that burned away every illusion. Betrayal twisted his features, not toward me, but toward her. For the first time, he saw her clearly, and the monster she had tried to hide revealed itself in the sterile light of that office. Her empire had collapsed in seconds. But my revenge was only beginning. Elise's fall came faster than even I had imagined. The riches she boasted about to her friends, the security she dangled before Martin, all dissolved the moment the bank enforced my husband's final instructions. The accounts she had claimed as hers were frozen, the assets redirected into trusts she could never touch. Every door she tried to pry open slammed shut in her face, and the woman who strutted so confidently only days before began to stumble like a drunk stripped of balance. Her humiliation spread quickly. Those same friends who once praised her new independence whispered instead about her desperation. Invitations stopped arriving. Business partners who once promised meetings no longer answered her calls. Greed had carried her high, but the higher the climb, the sharper the fall. Martin turned to me then, hollow-eyed, his voice cracked with regret. He begged for forgiveness, swearing he had only been blind, not cruel. I listened, but his betrayal had rooted itself deep, and though I nodded, I could not pretend the wound had healed. His choices had cut me open, and wounds like that do not close easily. Elise and her brother scattered like rats when the flood came, abandoning the home they had invaded. She left with nothing but her pride, and even that burned to ash. Daniel disappeared into shadows, disgraced and penniless. Their schemes, their lies, had become the very noose that choked them. I did not gloat. I did not need to. Victory tasted far sweeter when savored in silence. Still, in the quiet of the night, as I traced the outline of the second key in my hand, I felt a strange warmth rise within me. The ashes of pride, glowing in the ruins of her downfall. And yet, I knew my story was not finished. Even after Elise's downfall, victory did not bring peace. It carried scars I could not shed. At night, I still heard Martin's voice, sharp with accusation, blind with devotion to a woman who had plotted against me. His betrayal replayed in my mind like a wound reopened by memory, a reminder that blood ties can slice deeper than any enemy's blade. I could have shouted my triumph, paraded the documents, and humiliated Elise before the entire community. But I chose silence. True revenge does not always roar. It waits, it seeps, it poisons quietly until there is nothing left to corrupt. Elise still breathed, but the life she imagined was gone. Her name was stained, her ambitions rotted at the root, and her future lay in ruins. That was punishment enough. I kept my victories hidden, speaking little of the truth even when others asked. Some still believed the whispers she once spread, painting me bitter and unstable. I let them. Their doubt only protected me further, keeping my power veiled. Let them think me fragile. I alone knew the truth. And through it all, I lived on. Not as the widow Elise tried to erase, but as the survivor she could never defeat. I carried grief in one hand, vengeance in the other, and together they became the weight that steadied me. But silence is never without a cost. For in that silence, loneliness grew, and I began to wonder if revenge had saved me or doomed me. Time became my greatest ally. While Elise clawed at the shadows of her former life, I rebuilt mine piece by piece. She chased ventures that promised wealth but delivered nothing: schemes, investments, hollow partnerships. Each failure left her thinner, more desperate, her beauty stripped away by worry, her charm soured into bitterness. Greed had hollowed her out, and the woman who once strutted with false triumph was reduced to a ghost of her own hunger. Martin finally saw the truth when her mask crumbled beyond repair. Their marriage collapsed, leaving him broken but free, though his betrayal remained etched into me like a scar that time could not erase. Daniel, loyal only to opportunity, abandoned her too, slinking away to chase new victims elsewhere. Elise was left with nothing but her name, and even that became a curse whispered behind her back. I meanwhile learned to breathe again. I found solace in the quiet, in the small victories of survival. My husband's foresight had protected me, but it was not the key alone that saved me. It was my patience, my ability to endure humiliation until the moment came to rise. Strength, I learned, is not in striking first, but in knowing when to strike at all. When I look back, I feel no pity. Justice does not beg for my hand. It finds its way with or without me. Elise dug her grave the moment she reached for that safe, blinded by greed she thought no one else could see. And I was there, holding the second key, not just to the safe, but to her destruction.